But welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Be kind to the guys in this mess in the first place.
Put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, spanking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Oh. Hello, and I didn't notice that my intro screen had ended. Hello, and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. And I think we've got some interesting bullshit to look at. Bonsoir, Atria. Bon fait du travail. C'est le 1er de mai. Ou... la fausse fête du travail américaine qui existe seulement pour nous faire oublier du motif qui a porté à la création de la vraie fête du travail. Parce qu'on veut partout pas qu'on pense à les markets. Ok, yes, thank you, merci. Okay, so one thing I just wanted to give a little tip, because if you're like me and you're paying attention to Gaza a lot, it is easy to get, like, utterly traumatized completely and overwhelmed by just the fucking horrors of the thing. There's a Twitter channel I would like to recommend that kind of helps counteract that a bit, helps kind of get the right attitude to be in the right sort of frame of mind to think about to think about, ways to escalate, ways to do something about it. And it's called, I'm going to just write it in chat too, Palestine Tunes, just all one word. And it is Palestinian resistance music. They do videos with subtitles and transliteration as well in English and with the Arabic lyrics as well for anyone who wants to follow along. And it's just sort of the right attitude to have. I think the only attitude to have if the idea is to try to think of ways to actually do something about this. Because while these songs also talk about, like, the horrific atrocities, the focus is elsewhere. The focus is it's more the genre of, we're not trapped in here with you, Israeli desk squads. You, I think you'll find, are trapped in here with us. I mean, it has, with songs where there's ones called If You Want a Ground Invasion, and the refrain of it is, basically, I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact lyrics and my Arabic is not very good. If you want a ground invasion, come on, we'll fuck you up, basically. And it is these videos, and the reason I'm not showing any of them is because these videos have often been taken down from YouTube already, and I would prefer not to be taken down from YouTube myself, because the videos are full of, like, footage of resistance operations in Gaza, even the older songs. So, I mean, in any case, it helps with the... It helps get into a frame of mind that is not so much, Jesus fuck, will it ever end, but, meet one, je l'adore. J'avais un prof d'histoire au lycée qui nous a fait voir tout le film entier, et moi, dès ce jour-là, il y a... une trentaine d'années. C'est un de mes films favoris. C'est un de mes films préférés. I love that movie. Mate One, if you haven't seen Mate One, watch it. It is just so beautifully done. It is about what is known as the Mingo County Coldfield Wars in West Virginia, which were intense, and the union organization efforts of miners there. Essentially, you have like three contingents. One is these local guys who've been living there for ages and more or less had their land bought out from under them by prospectors who did not tell them that they were buying it out from under them because there was extremely valuable coal under it, just kind of handed them some money which they needed, and so they ended up working in the mine for bullshit money. Yeah, I mean, and these groups of black workers and Italian immigrants who were brought in as scabs, except nobody told them that they were brought in to be scabs. They only find this out upon arriving in the holler, and end up all joining forces to fight the bosses. And it is just so beautifully done. It deals with so many things. I mean, it is one of those Hollywood films where it's actually kind of surprising that it got made because it is done so well, because it covers this issue so well. So if you haven't seen it, I mean, the cast is amazing. You got James Earl Jones, is James Strathairn or something Strathairn. You got, it's just an amazing cast, amazing film, beautifully written, and well done for the way it handles the message, the way it handles the whole subject of union organizing and essentially the intersections between class struggle and racism and anti-immigrant bullshit, and how basically if the workers are going to win, we have to get over all that shit and join forces. It's I can't say enough good things about that fucking movie. It is great. I had a history teacher in high school, one of my absolute favorite teachers, and he showed us this movie. We watched the whole thing over, I think, 3 whole classes, and it's been one of my favorites ever since. And it features one of the rarities of an actual cop who came good, because the elected sheriff was Sid Hatfield. This is a true story. The guy, he was like, as in the Hatfields and the McCoys. It's worth noting that those Hatfields. He was elected by the workers of this town, and he was not having the company's bullshit, as a result of which they assassinated him on the courthouse steps. But, so, like, rare good cop sighting there. So let's see what we've got. We've got some interesting stuff here. We've got Loser Box, Hassan attacked by Israeli tour guide. That sounds like that could be interesting. It just showed up in my Rex today. And we've got Sam Harris and Destiny both talking about their, like, debating experience. We got Pim Tool looking at Twat Mulch, sneaking around the DNC in disguise as an anti-racist liberal. Yeah, we might actually. On va voir. Let's see. Thought I had some recent. This one could be interesting. Peace with North Korea. Caleb Maupin at LA Family Church in June 7th. That could be something worthwhile. I mean, I know what he's going to say. He's going to do this bullshit where he claims that Trump was actually trying to make peaceful reunification happen. Which, no, he fucking wasn't. He was trying to do the opposite. He was trying to sabotage talks. But I've never heard him try to make this case long form, so that might be interesting. So yeah, why don't we start out with that? We've also got some Darman shit, which could also be rather entertaining in its shitty sort of a way. I'm gonna start out and just have a look and see what Caleb Maupin trying to talk about all sorts of things he doesn't know anything about. Oh, the audio quality is wonderful. Oh, one mask in the room. It's nice to see. It's nice to see any fucking masks, actually. I've heard that he's been getting connected up with the Moonies lately. And so this will be interesting in that regard.
Thank you all so much for being out here. I'm glad to see that we're talking to our neighbors. We're not just sitting by ourselves. We're getting to know our tables. But yes, for anybody new here, yeah, welcome to the Los Angeles Family Church.
Okay, just out of curiosity. Yeah, and Pa. Just gotta look up Los Angeles Family Church to see if this is associated with the Unification Church. Family Federation for World Peace. Oh, yep. This is Moonies. This is Moonies. This is like he's going to a fucking Moonie cult event to talk about Korean unification. Having actually spoken at length about how the Moonies are a CIA op, to an anti-communist CIA op, which actually, in that particular case, happens to be true.
Yeah, thank you. Together with Caleb Maupin from the Center of Political Innovations over here with me.
I hope that the audio improves, because if the audio's like this the whole time, I don't know that I'm going to stay with it, which would be unfortunate, because I want to see how he talks to the audience of a cult, a far-right cult, rabidly anti-communist, rabidly anti-DPRK, it's worth noting, the publishers of the Washington Times, a horrible piece of shit fake newspaper.
The pastors for this house is Pastor Joshua just stepped out, but we have our co-pastor, Pastor Takayo, and Pastor Joshua.
I'm gonna just drop this in here. This is a link to, these are the people who this church is associated with. It's the Moonies. It's it's Moon Sun Myung.
Caleb Maupin up here in the front, you can maybe just give him a round of applause.
But is the microphone turned on at all? I can't hear. This sounds like you might as well not have the mic on.
We are a church here, and so to start our program off, we actually want to have an opening prayer so we can welcome the co-pastor.
I wonder if anyone's going to get married at this thing, because like the main thing the Moonies are known for is mass weddings.
Pastor Takayo Holmes for our opening prayer.
Man, from Dugan to LaRouche to the fucking Moonies. That's wild.
Please join me in prayer. Our most beloved Heavenly Parent and true parents, Heavenly Parent, thank you so much for allowing us to gather here this evening, Heavenly Parent. We may all come from different backgrounds, and we may be of different race or culture or where we live, but Heavenly Parent, it doesn't matter because we are all here as one family. Heavenly Parent, we believe that all people can come together, united as one, and we are all from the same origin, so we can belong together as brothers and sisters. We can listen to each other, we can understand one another, we can create a unity, Heavenly Parent. So thank you for allowing us this space where we can share our thoughts together and learn and really share this vision of the reunification.
Because we're going to
trying to get to the bit where it's Caleb Muppet.
So, actually, this song has actually been, the lyrics have been written by Dr. Haktahan Moon via a vegetarian called Mother
Oh
Moon.
fuck, there's gonna be a song now? Like, when does he get to, we wanna hear his bullshit. Oh, the song might be interesting, actually. Fuck it, we'll look at the song. And see if the audio improves any as well.
So, I'm sure we can all feel her heart through the lyrics. So, if you all rise, there's something new, we can all sing together. The song is called Two Nights Into One. English or Korean? English. That's gonna be easier.
Yeah, it sounds like this must have been translated. Because the... Yeah, because the sound, this is actually sounds like a traditional Korean rhythm, actually, melody. Now, what I'm curious about, because one thing that the Muppet is known for, to me anyway, to anyone I would suppose who's watched him address different audiences, is how he will completely change how he identifies himself politically, depending on who he's talking to. I mean, like, literally the main source of the Moonies, hey, Riveroon, like, one of their main sponsors was, during the fascist dictatorship period in South Korea, the secret police heavily supported them. And even now, like, okay, when North Koreans come south, they have to go, they aren't just allowed to go straight into South Korean society. They have to go through this, like, re-education thing. And one of the things about the re-education facility, the Hanawon, it's called, is that basically no outsiders are allowed in except for right-wing fundamentalist Christian organizations, like really hardline right-wing fascist fundamentalist Christian organizations. And that is another source of fucking indoctrination and, like, recruiting for cults like this. They misspelled Baekdu. It's not B-E-A-K-D. I mean, okay, it can be a B sometimes. Normally it's written with a P. But it's A-E, not E-A. Baekdu. The South Korean secret police? No, they were not connected to the Stasi. They were connected to the CIA. They were connected to the CIA, especially, but also, like, probably to Japanese intelligence. Certainly, during the time of the U.S. occupation of Vietnam, they were connected to South Vietnam's intelligence services. They played a role in sending South Korean mercenaries to support the occupation. So, I mean, totally a group that someone who calls themselves a communist and actually means it ought to be working with. How long does this fucking song go on? Fun fact, the Japanese Prime Minister, yeah, I mean, that's very true, GGM. I mean, it seems like this microphone is not on. It sounds like it is just recording from the mic of whatever, like, the camera that's in the back of the room or something like that. It doesn't seem to be hooked up to any speakers. Oh, well, because he's making a grand entrance. I was also looking for him in the room.
Maybe when the unification takes place, that'll be the song we can sing in a very epic way. So yes, now that the spirit is set, yes, we are here gathered together, brothers and sisters together. But I think we've had some key people who's ultimately brought us together. And if you part of the CPI, part of the LA, so you know who our special guest is here today. And so we'll be having two speakers this evening, and our first one is a very special guest. He flew all the way from New York. He is the founder for the Center of Political Innovation.
Yes, I mean, he is a very special guest. I guess that's not wrong. Although if you're gonna give his CV, he's the founder of two centers for political innovation. The one that kicked him out and then folded, and the one that he set up as a fallback position.
CPI. He is in addition a journalist, a political analyst,
and other things that he isn't.
And very recently, the leader of the U.S. delegation for the World Youth Festival held in Russia just this past March. And so we're honored to have him here. So let's all welcome up Caleb.
Oh, he noticed that the mic isn't working.
Why don't we take this opportunity to stand up and stretch a little bit?
Get out of the fucking way. We weren't. Who the hell is this?
Take a stretch. Sit down and take a deep breath.
He just reconnected the microphone, and he's still not as loud as the laughing in the room.
Now, get comfortable. We've got a lot to talk about tonight. The fact that I'm here tonight is pretty solid evidence
that you're a fucking fraud.
That the world is constantly changing.
Well, nothing as fast as Caleb Moffin's political loyalties.
And the fact that I was invited here tonight is pretty solid evidence that the world is constantly changing. Change can be scary.
Any change that results in Caleb Muppet being invited to where you are can be definitely quite unsettling.
Change can be uncomfortable. Change can be frightening.
Being around Caleb Muppet is all three.
But I've learned that if you want to find peace with the universe, you have to embrace it. You have to see the change as an exciting opportunity.
And he is an exciting opportunist.
I've often said, today's Friday, and I do not know what tomorrow will bring.
Yeah, who knows what fucking dodgy group he's gonna be headlining at next time. Like, maybe he'll do like a Helter Skelter reunion, like the Manson cult. Maybe see if he can get the Branch Davidians to get the gang back together. Who knows?
But every Friday in my life has been followed by a Saturday.
That is profound. The days of the week in his life have always been in the conventional order.
But I do know that the Saturday that comes after this Friday will be unlike any other Saturday that has ever existed before. And the Sunday that comes the next day will be unlike any other Sunday that has ever existed before. And we have to learn to embrace the world around us and see it as gradually moving toward perfection, gradually moving toward a state of beauty. And rather than fear it, understand.
Okay, so we've got the answer. He is taking a completely different tack. This does not sound. This is like he's decided to just really embrace the cult shit and like just completely leave out any pretense of
changes and adjustments are necessary. It's all a necessary road toward that perfection. So with that perspective, I'm going to talk about the Korean Peninsula. I want to start out by talking about a time that I had a teacher who got it wrong.
I guess this is somebody who passed him.
Because I was taught in school that the printing press was invented by a German guy named Johannes Gutenberg. Many people believe that the printing press was invented by Johannes Gutenberg. But a couple of years later, I had another teacher who pointed out, well, actually, the printing press wasn't invented by Johannes Gutenberg. It was actually invented by the Chinese. Marco Polo brought it to Europe when he came back from China.
Okay, where is this going?
But then I learned when I was in college that that teacher was also wrong. That the first book, the first printed book in history, was printed in Korea in the year of 1377, 200 years before Johannes Gutenberg. And
that I actually think is accurate. Just
that's proof
to say.
The Korean Peninsula has been a happening place for quite some time. But there's something else that's important to talk about there.
What, more important than who invented the printing press? Like, this is, that's what he's leading with. That's what everyone's here for. Oh, wow, okay. They're passing the torch. It's a microphone relay.
The other thing that's important to talk about...
This one doesn't work either. Like, check whether it's turned on.
Is there's a reason that people remember Johannes Gutenberg and the printing press in Europe.
Well, it's because of Steve Gutenberg, certainly.
And that's because when Johannes Gutenberg started printing indulgences for the Catholic Church, and he started printing the Bible, that was a huge game changer. Because suddenly people had access to information in ways they had never had it before. People started reading the Bible for themselves.
What I love is somehow, no matter what, one thing that is very consistent with Caleb Muppet is that you find somebody extremely anti-Semitic to wax romantic about. Like Johannes Gutenberg, like the stuff he had. You see, he thought when he invented Protestantism that he was gonna be the guy to convince Jews to convert and everything like that. And then he took his Protty stuff to the Jewish community. Is like, hey, I know you haven't been keen on Christianity so far, but I got Christianity 2.0 for you. Want to check it out? And they're like, nah, we're cool. And then he just basically just went off on, like, apparently he was shocked by this, and he was really pissed off because then he just wrote all sorts of just really nasty anti-Semitic incitement.
Newspapers became available. Mass printing enlightened people in a way they had never been enlightened before, and that gave birth to all kinds of changes. You had the Protestant Reformation, you had the eventual revolutions that changed the course of history, you had the emergence of the modern world, and a change in access to information brought about a change in the course of world history. That's very important because I think the time we're living in right now is an age.
Fun fact, Abe Shinzo, the former Japanese prime minister who that guy shot a year or so ago, hardline, right-wing, horrible guy, very much connected to the Unification Church. the people who run the church that he's giving this speech at.
Where access to information is also being revolutionized. With the internet now, with social media, information is available in ways that hasn't been available before, and people are connected.
Yeah, I mean, look at the people around you. Most of those people in that room look fairly young. They probably grew up with this stuff. This isn't. Oh wow, that's a freeze frame. That's like, he looks fucking okay. His face looks fucking claymation now. Like that claymation character Penny on like Pee-wee's Playhouse, I think it was. Jesus, that's fucking screenshot that. Get a still of that. But the hell was I just talking about? I mean, he's talking about social media like it's new to a room that is at least 50% full of people who grew up with it.
In ways they haven't been connected before. And people are listening to ideas they haven't heard in ways they have never done before. And that's why tonight I would like to urge people to remember something that it can be hard to remember, which is
pi to the 30th digit?
There are two sides to every story.
Wow. Is he just about to talk about the collapse of CPI 1.0?
There are two sides to every story, and we forget that. And often the way we hear things, especially when we talk about countries like North Korea, we hear a very one-sided version of events, and it doesn't even occur to us that there's another side of the story. But if we look at our
Okay, this could be interesting, actually. I mean, first of all, I do not expect him to know shit about North Korea. Yeah, nothing that I've seen him say on the subject convinces me that he's ever spent any time. Fuck yeah, a claymation of Caleb's like that. Yeah, no, somebody seriously ought to do that. Actually, one of my nieces has done some amazing like stop animation stuff. Like, both of my nieces are really incredible. I mean, the stuff that they come up with. But one time, like a couple of years ago, my older niece, she did a whole really well done stop animation film that she did from the start.
Country. At a time when we were divided, we can see that there's two sides to that story. One of the most famous and beloved Hollywood movies is Gone with the Wind. Has anyone ever seen Gone with the Wind? It's a beloved, famous Hollywood movie.
Yeah, in 2024, I guess, like, really? That's what he's going for? I think that Gone with the Wind kind of lost a certain amount of popularity somewhere along there. I mean, and it's worth noting, I mean, one of the interesting things, like, if you go on Marxist.org and read C.L.R. James, amongst others, you'll see actually, like, black leftists, black communists, black MLs, black Trotskyists, like, were writing about how horrible that fucking movie was at the time. Actually, C.L.R. James calls out a couple of, I think he calls out Langston Hughes, because Langston Hughes totally went along with the Soviet Union first saying, let's do a movie, let's bring in a bunch of black actors from the States and do a movie about lynchings. And a whole bunch of black actors went because they really wanted to actually do something about this, and they thought that was a powerful tool that they would have. At the same time, the Soviet government was negotiating some sort of recognition deal with the U.S. And one of the things they negotiated away was making a movie about lynching. And so all these actors had come all the way to Moscow to film this thing, were told this, protested, and then Pravda smeared them and said they were just drunk and undisciplined. And so C.L.R. James was saying, wrote a whole thing about how, like, the other, like, black Stalinists who were writing all sorts of articles, quite rightly condemning the racism of Gone with the Wind, didn't say a damn thing about that. So, I mean, but it's 2024 and he's talking about Gone with the Wind as if nobody has any qualms about it? That's interesting.
It's about, Miss Scarlet. I do declare, Captain Butler, them Yankees is coming down here and ruining everything. It's horrible. It's horrible. If you sat down and you interviewed Miss Scarlet about the Civil War, she would tell you her perspective. And she wouldn't be lying to you. That's how she saw it. But if you interviewed the slaves, they would have a very different perspective on the events. And
perhaps they're not equally valid perspectives, though.
We look at the fact that
and of course the thing with Gone with the Wind and why maybe that isn't a great movie to use for this is that it also puts a whole perspective in the mouths of the characters, of the enslaved characters. Say where they think it's all lovely actually, and they're cool with it. I mean, God, what a fucked up choice.
Recently, a few years ago, there was a riot about a Confederate statue. There are two sides to every story, and the way people view conflicts is largely based on where they live, where they came from, what town.
A riot about a Confederate statue? Like, that's an interesting way to... I mean, he's talking about 2020. He's talking about the riots against racist police terror, which also took down some Confederate statues. A bunch of them, actually. Including some of the most ridiculous looking ones, like that fucking Bedford Forrest statue where he just looks like a fucking imp. But, like, so that's how he's gonna describe the George Floyd Breonna Taylor uprising.
They grew up in, who their family was. And that if you want to bring peace in the world, you have to recognize that there's another side to these stories. There's another side to these conflicts. Before I ever got interested in communism, when I was just a small child, my family hosted a student, an international student who was going to a nearby college who was from Bulgaria. And this guy was, in his 20s, he was attending the university, he was not a communist. And I said to him, naively, I said, is there anyone in Bulgaria who still believes in communism? And he looked at me and he said, absolutely. He said, my grandfather. And I said, wow, how could anyone believe in communism? Communism is this horrible system and all that.
Like, is this all gonna be his anecdotes on, like, both sidesing things?
Why does your grandfather believe in communism? And he said, well, his grandfather had survived the Second World War. And after the Second World War was over, his grandfather was a young man, and the new government that came to power in Bulgaria got all the young men together and mobilized them to build roads. Bulgaria had never had a network of paved modern roads. So all the young men from the country got together and they were given uniforms and they went from country to remote villages, to the countryside, and they paved the roads of Bulgaria. And his grandfather remembered this as the best moment in his life because...
Which, I mean, yeah. It's interesting that that's the anecdote. Like, I would have thought, if this grandfather was old enough for that, he would have been old enough to remember, like, the partisan struggle and stuff. Instead, he's going with road construction.
He was working with people his age. He was seeing different parts of the country.
Including the suit.
In every little town and village they went to, people applauded for them as heroes. And he felt this spirit of unity. They were rebuilding the country. It was going to be a new Bulgaria. The war and the pain and the trauma was over, and it was a new day. And that's why, even in the 1990s, this student's grandfather was a huge admirer of the Soviet Union, a huge admirer of Stalin, because he lived through that. And that experience was his experience. And one thing I must say is that we take that for granted here in the West. We take for granted the fact that we have paved roads.
I don't know why we would. Like, in the U.S., the roads are shit.
We pay for...
I have to say, I mean, like, I've been around a bit. The only places I've been to where the roads are roughly in the same kind of state as they are in, like, here in Ohio, for example, are, like, Chile and Peru. And at least some of those roads are in better shape.
The fact that we have electricity. We take for granted the fact that we have running water. But in countries that have never had that, in countries that have never had literacy, that have never had electrification, these things are a pretty big deal. If you went from never having electricity, never having running water, never having access to education, suddenly having it, that's going to be a huge, huge change in your life. And if you look at communism in the 20th century, it
Well, not communism, but
was largely countries that were underdeveloped.
yeah, what's interesting about this is that he's really kind of switched away from even pretending that he's really pretending to be talking about like anything specifically communist. It's just national development stuff.
Breaking out of the dominance of other countries economically and developing and paving roads and building power plants.
I haven't heard. Did he refer to partisans? All I heard was him talking about road construction in Bulgaria
And building modern university systems. And that is important when you want to understand what happened on the Korean Peninsula, and I'll tell you why.
I mean, I'm just very curious how he's, first of all, because he doesn't know shit about this, but like how this is going to be received by the Moonies. Anyone who came here a little bit late, this church that he's speaking in is a Moonie church. A far-right, anti-communist, South Korean cult connected with the, South Korean... Oh, I missed that. I was too caught up in the road building.
In the 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, things were very, very bad in North Korea. There was a food crisis. They needed petroleum, gasoline to run their tractors, and they couldn't get it. And their food system came to a grinding halt.
Well, that wasn't actually... Like, here he's already gotten something way wrong. The reason that there was a famine in the DPRK was that their agriculture... Okay, first of all, you have to know that the north of the Korean Peninsula has never been the agricultural breadbasket of Korea. Because it's too mountainous, it's too rocky, and it's too cold. It's just not a great place for agriculture. So one of the early initiatives of the DPRK was to get as much land under the plow as possible to try to solve the agricultural problem by just having all sorts of, putting everything under the plow. And the thing is that in order to do that, they did all sorts of hillsides. They put hillsides under the plow. They got rid of all sorts of natural flood defenses. And that kind of worked for a while, and it worked especially because they had the Soviet Union giving them subsidized imports, subsidized fertilizer imports, food, helping to fill the gaps. In the 90s, a couple of things happen. One, the Soviet Union collapses, so now they've got no subsidized fertilizer, no subsidized food imports. Basically, they're completely on their own there. The U.S. takes the opportunity to really turn the screws with economic warfare, cutting them off from any chance of importing from any place else. And then they have massive torrential rainfalls. Suddenly, the decision that looked good and had worked reasonably okay for a while of putting all these hillsides under the plow ended up being an absolute disaster, because without the natural flood defenses, you ended up with these huge mudslides. The crops totally failed, and this was a time when they could not afford to have a crop failure, because there was nobody else available who could fill the gap. Yeah, I mean, apart from a trickle of aid and stuff like that later on, although that was barely enough. But so that is why the famine happened. It wasn't just that they ran out of tractors. The issue was that their crops failed because everything got flooded. And they do seem to, there does seem to have been a major learning process from that. There's at least a lot of talk on North Korean TV about rebuilding the flood defenses, and the way that they're doing that, it seems to a great extent, is planting fruit trees on hillsides. People who've looked at satellite imagery say there's less of that than you would think based on the way they talk about it. But, I mean, the idea is totally sound. Because, I mean, for one thing, it's trees that were acting as flood defenses, preventing these mudslides and things like that. And having trees that are generating food actually makes sense in the sense of trying to achieve some sort of agricultural independence. So these days, they're also doing a lot of stuff with, like, polytunnels and greenhouses, like large-scale greenhouse complexes as well, to sort of deal with that. Although at the moment, they're once again dealing with massive flooding.
People were starving to death. And it was an absolute disaster. And it was a very, very bad time. And many international observers looked on and they said any other government in the world would have collapsed under those circumstances. But if you look at today, the Korean Workers' Party is still in power. They're still in power.
That's not the name of the party. He got the name of the fucking party wrong. It is very specifically the Workers' Party of Korea. That is their official English name.
And the grandson of the founder of North Korea, Kim Il-sung, his grandson, Kim Jong-un, is the leader of the country. And if you look at the fact that they got through a huge crisis that they now call the arduous march period in their country, where people...
Okay, he got that right. I mean... an arduous march, it's worth noting, that they didn't invent the term for the famine. It is a reference to a particularly nasty battle against the Japanese.
People were literally starving to death, where their food system came to a grinding halt, where electricity was limited, where things were that bad.
I mean, electricity still is limited. It's a lot less limited than it used to be. But I mean, they only have a few hours of electricity a day in the major cities. In the countryside, it's considerably less.
The government of North Korea did not fall. You have to acknowledge there's a lot of people who feel very, very loyal to the Korean Workers' Party. And I'm going to tell you some of why that is.
Oh, great. Please do tell us more about why that is, since you clearly know so much about it, like the name of the party.
And my source for these statistics is the country study published by the U.S. Library of Congress. The U.S. Library of Congress publishes a country study of every country in the world. And these statistics come from the U.S. Library of Congress's country study of North Korea. Between 1948 and 1990, the life expectancy of the average person in North Korea increased by 30 years. 30 years. Can you imagine what a 30-year life expectancy increase means?
Well, I mean, we're experiencing the opposite trend here, so... you just sort of rewind a few years and you get an idea.
How much would things have to improve in a country for people to be living 30 years on average more than they did before?
I mean, it's worth noting part of that is just how bad things were in the country before that. Because first you had the Japanese occupation, which was genocidal as fuck. Then, I mean, so they already had a country that was wrecked as a result of that. Then the U.S. invades South Korea, murders between 1 and 200,000 South Koreans because they didn't want to go along with the idea that the U.S. should run South Korea, which the U.S. felt rather strongly about. And then that all comes to a head in 1950. It's not actually clear who followed the first... who actually fired the first shot in 1950. The historians have found, because there was all sorts of cross-border provocations going on for a while there. But in any case, the U.S. took that opportunity to murder millions more Koreans and just completely raze everything that was still standing in the north to the ground. So, I mean, in that sense, I mean, the life expectancy they would have had in, 1948 and through 1953... would have definitely left a lot of room for improvement.
In 1955, Korea was recovering from the Korean War. The country had been bombed. Every single building about 1 story tall had been destroyed in the Korean War. And in 1955, North Korea had only 285 hospitals in the whole country. But in 1986...
Which is a meaningless number unless you actually... Like, what is 258 hospitals for how many people? I mean, I'm sure it wasn't enough, but I mean...
The U.S. Library of Congress, they had 2,401 hospitals. And you want to talk about a huge increase in access to medical care. You go from 285 hospitals to 2,401 hospitals. That's huge.
I mean, and I will give this. I mean, if he's going to just keep on doing these statistics, which actually, he's not wrong there. In fact, one of the interesting things, there was a study that was actually like analyzing the COVID response in the DPRK by people who were by no means like fans of the North Korean state or anything like that, just public health researchers. And one of the things they pointed out that was unusual amongst what they categorize as low to middle income countries is that the main causes of death in the DPRK are not infectious diseases, which is more common in low to middle income, but actually things like heart disease and more like diseases of old age and stuff like that. I mean, so it is true, they did massively improve their healthcare system.
Huge increase in access to medical care. When the communists took power on the Korean Peninsula, 20% of the population had any kind of education whatsoever. Any kind of education. By 1950...
Yeah, I mean... Also von Sarah Wagenknecht und ihrer Partei halte ich überhaupt nichts. Also das ist aus meiner Sicht noch ein weiteres rechtes Pack.
Again, just a few years after the whole country had been bombed and destroyed during the Korean War, according to the U.S. Library of Congress, they had wiped out illiteracy in the northern half of the Korean Peninsula. These are huge, dramatic achievements.
Is it all going to be statistics? Are we going to...
They were done under the leadership of Kim Il-sung and under the leadership of the Korean Workers' Party, and they were done in the aftermath of a devastating war in which the whole country was ravaged and destroyed by bombs. And they were done with aid from China, aid from the Soviet Union, but there are millions of people who lived through that, and their loyalty to the Korean Workers' Party...
Is this all going to be like fucking statistics on tractor production and stuff, or are we going to get into some other stuff?
Their office, all their stuff was out on the street, and there was the complete works of Kim Il-sung, because they'd been in the Black Panther Party office, and so we took it, and that's why we have the complete works of Kim Il-sung in our office.
Wait a second. Okay, I feel like I just missed something important there. They like nicked a bunch of stuff out of the offices of the Black Panther Party?
Heroes. And the Black Panthers, they had a relationship with many different governments around the world, but for some reason North Korea was a government that they had a particularly close relationship with. If you look at old issues...
I mean, it's worth noting that they were less than impressed with Juche ideology. Like, they were impressed with other things, but the ideology, I remember, I forget which Panther it was said this, but said that essentially that the whole thing was actually kind of weird and cult-like, and that Juche seems to be basically what he called an ideology of justification, where it's just used to mean whatever it is. Hey, Phoenix, welcome. Good to see you. Where whatever the government is currently doing is somehow Juche ideology.
The Black Panther newspaper, they got Kim Il-sung's face on the front page, and Black Panther leader Eldridge Cleaver, when he fled from the United States, he moved to North Korea. One of his daughters was born in North Korea. And I actually, one of the communist groups I was around years ago, they had a copy of the complete works of Kim Il-sung in their office. And I asked them why, and they were in Detroit, and they said, well, in the early 80s, when the Black Panther Party of Detroit closed down their office,
okay, so
all
he
their
didn't...
stuff was out on the street, and there was the complete works of Kim Il-sung, because they'd been in the Black Panther Party office, and so we took it, and that's why we have the complete
Yeah, I mean, very cult-like. Very strong cult energy. I mean, it is very much a cult of personality. And you very much get that feel. If you watch North Korean TV, I mean, even if you don't actually understand what they're saying, I think just from the visuals, just from the tone of voice, you really do get you get a very clear sense that it is it is a very intense cult of personality.
Kim Il-sung in our office. This is important to acknowledge, and that, in North Korea there are a number of Africans from various African countries where there were civil wars and conflicts who fled to North Korea. There are a number of Arabs in Palestine.
Actually, that's not, for the most part, actually, that's not really the case. I mean, there is, like, an Afro-Korean, a very small Afro-Korean population in the DPRK. But it is actually largely, like, children of African diplomats. Like, one of, if I remember correctly, one of the U.S. defectors ended up marrying one of the daughters of an African diplomat and a North Korean.
Palestinians living in North Korea. And we don't hear about these things in American media, but North Korea has a record and reputation of solidarity with other countries. In fact, Senegal, when they...
Well, they did under Kim Il-sung, it's worth noting. Much less so since. Like, Kim Il-sung, actually, I mean, all the other things you can say about him, and there are many, I mean, he did have the experience of being in a partisan struggle against colonialism, and so he did reach out to others who were involved in similar struggles. Quite a lot of that. Much less of that from Kim Jong-il and also from Kim Jong-un, although it is worth noting that some of the weapons that the Palestinian resistance are using in Gaza are actually like North Korean RPGs, fragmentation rounds and things like that, although how they got from North Korea to there, who, you know, whether they were sent directly or whether they bought them off of somebody who had bought them or something like that, that isn't clear.
Built a monument to their independence. They hired...
Ja, das überrascht mich überhaupt nicht. Das, sie konkurriert mit denen eigentlich um dieselben Wähler. Gute Nacht. Yeah, I mean, he's clearly, like, I mean, he's just traveling around everywhere, and now he's like, the wild thing about this, I don't know how long you've been here, Phoenix, but, okay, guess, if you are just getting here, guess who he's speaking to. Guess who this Los Angeles family church is that he's talking to. Yeah, because it is wild. It is actually... even for him.
North Korean architects and engineers to design it. There's this beautiful monument in Senegal, you should go look it up, to the independence of this African country, built by North Korea. These are things that we're not made aware of in the United States. But I want to talk about nuclear weapons, because I think it's important to understand why North Korea has nuclear weapons. Because generally the version...
I mean, that isn't actually hard to understand at all. I mean, like, anyone... Like, literally, that's the most obvious thing around. They're constantly being threatened by the U.S., and either they can basically shut down their entire economy in order to have their army constantly on high alert, so they're not doing what they'd otherwise be doing, like doing construction and stuff like that, which is what the army's mostly used for. Or they can have a nuclear deterrent, in which case they only need a couple of people to press buttons. Like, I mean, not much, I mean, that's just obvious. You could just, if you want to see what it means to have a significant segment of your population constantly mobilized, what that does to your economy, actually, look at how bad the Israeli economy is now. There are lots of factors involved in that. Like, the fact that, I mean, a lot of investors have decided that Israel's a shitty investment, but one of them is that the reserves have been mobilized for like 10 straight months, and so they've been taken out of their normal work, and so it's totally wrecking the economy. So, I mean, it's kind of obvious why they would want to have that sort of deterrent rather than... Yeah, I mean, it is fucked up. Like, being a useless asshole who is just grifting is definitely more lucrative than having principles in capitalism. I mean, really, his career is an indictment of this system.
Facts that we're given about why he has nuclear weapons is that, well, Kim Jong-un is crazy and he wants to murder us all, and so he's got nuclear weapons so he can threaten to murder us all. Well, that's malarkey. That's not the case. So, first of all, let's talk about the fact that in South Korea, there are, at this point, I want to get the number right, yes, there are 28,500 U.S. troops.
Technically, also the South Korean army counts as U.S. troops because in wartime they are still under U.S. command. For the longest time, they were under U.S. command always. One of the sort of advances towards South Korean independence that happened after the dictatorship got kicked out was that, at the very least, they get to run their own army during peacetime. Now, the far right in South Korea, people like the people he's talking to, actually think that's a bad thing. They actually would, I mean, I don't know if the Moonies take this line, but a lot of right-wing Christians in South Korea do, that it would be better if they didn't have their own army, if their army was just always under U.S. command.
Now, how would we feel if in Mexico there were thousands of troops from a country that we consider to be hostile or an enemy in the United States? Let's say there were 28,500 Russian troops in Mexico. Let's say that there were 28,500 Chinese troops in Mexico. How would we feel about that? But...
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Except even that does not work as an analogy because the power imbalance, I mean, I was talking about this yesterday, the power imbalance, there is like literally no real country you can use to simulate the power imbalance. You have to like use the aliens from Independence Day or some shit.
It's not just that those U.S. troops are there. Every year they do this.
I'm just going to skip it. This is long and I want to see if there's something more interesting than this.
Korean Peninsula, the first government on the Korean Peninsula to seek nuclear weapons. South Korea had a nuclear weapons program for quite some time. Rule in the 1980s. And even today...
Ugh. What?
Liberation Treaty when they feel safe enough. When they are confident enough that doing so won't result in them being overthrown, won't result in them being invaded, when they're confident enough that Russia and China would protect them under...
It's worth noting that at this particular moment, I mean, it's really interesting for him to be addressing a right-wing South Korean cult, because the right-wing South Korean government has been essentially tearing up a lot of the foundational agreements between the North and the South that sort of established relatively peaceful relations. So for him to be talking to them about this at this particular moment is an interesting choice.
Kind of a biting editorial after the death of Gaddafi, because they pointed out, you know, Saddam Hussein, he didn't have weapons of mass destruction, and Iraq got invaded and destroyed. And Gaddafi, he was trying to get them, and he gave up his weapons of mass destruction, and he got invaded and destroyed. And they said, look at us, we got nuclear weapons, and we're still here. And they said that, and who could argue with them? Who could argue with them? Seconds later, you see a bunch of guys marching around like this, right? You think North Korea is just a 24/7 military parade, but there's real fathers there, there's real daughters there, there's real mother, there's
What's the point? Wait, okay. I think we've hit something interesting here.
On TV, what do you see? I say countdown. I say North Korea, and then 2 to 3 seconds later, you see a bunch of guys marching around like this, right? You think North Korea is just a 24/7 military parade, but there's real fathers there, there's real daughters there, there's real...
The people fuck in North Korea.
Mother, there's brothers, there's sisters, there's children, there's families, and if there's a war, real people are going to die. And that's what her YouTube channel is trying to say, and we need messages like that on YouTube.
Yeah, but, I mean, we need better messages than this. Yeah, I mean, maybe... Okay. I just can't get over the fact that he's giving this speech to the fucking Moonies. Like, apart from the fact that, I mean, it is such a mask-off move for him because they are an absolutely far-right cult. He's also spoken about how they are a CIA op. So, I mean, he is just showing his whole ass. He does not stand for anything other than opportunism.
having young people from North Korea making YouTube videos about their life, and having them exchange and share with people from the United States, that's the road to peace. The road to peace is through trade. The road to peace is through development.
Okay, I mean, so now he's Thomas Friedman all of a sudden.
This is not just true for the Korean Peninsula, it's true for the entire world.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing that is the reason that the world is so peaceful right now is all the trade that's going on. The corporate globalization, that's done such a wonderful job. That's why there hasn't been any war in the 21st century.
When people have jobs, when people have health care, when people have education, they're a lot less likely to join drug gangs. They're a lot less likely to join terrorist groups. When people have something to live for, when they're able to see their children have a better life than they had. And that so much of the way we were taught about North Korea in the United States is extremely biased. So I wanted to end my remarks for tonight by quoting from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he was the great civil rights leader in the United States, and shortly before he died...
Well, thanks for reminding everybody, they're in L.A. I think people know who MLK is.
He gave a speech at Riverside Church in New York City, opposing the Vietnam War. And if you have an opportunity to go listen to or read the Beyond Vietnam...
Well, that was his message when he was talking to Dugin and the Russian and French fashion Moscow. He was like... The thing that really inspired him was watching them all goose-stepping. He completely changes his line depending on who he's talking to.
Speech of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's one of the most powerful and moving speeches, so much packed into one presentation. But in the speech, this is a quote from the speech. He said, "These are revolutionary times. All over the globe, men are revolting against old systems of exploitation and oppression. And out of the wounds of a frail world, new systems of justice and equality are being born. The shirtless and barefoot people of the land are rising up as never before." The people...
the fucking Unification Church was largely founded in order to stop them rising up.
Who sat in the darkness have seen great light. And we in the West must support them.
They were involved in the torture of political prisoners during the fascist dictatorship. Really, they probably are even now.
Revolutions. That was Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I think if he was alive today, he would say the exact same thing. Because these are revolutionary times. People who lived in darkness have seen the light. And the shirtless and barefoot people of the world are coming together to see more justice and equality. And there are millions of people here in the United States that are very unhappy with the way things are going. And the fact that we spend so much money on militarism, while 27 different states in this country are unpaving the roads. I don't know if you know this, but in 27 different states, you have municipalities that can't afford to maintain paved roads. So there's actually a machine called a reclaimer that pulls up the asphalt and pulverizes it. And where you used to have a paved road, you have a dirt road. Now, I never pretended to be a Nobel Prize winning economist, but we're going from paved roads to dirt roads. We have a pretty big problem in our economy.
Okay. That wasn't quite as... Well, let's see, we got 16 minutes. Let's think for our last 16 minutes. We're gonna check out Hassan attacked by Israeli tour guide. That was actually... I was expecting him... It was interesting. He did not seem to go through the... Trump was actually trying to peacefully reunify Korea bullshit that he usually does. But the fact that he's talking to the Moonies is just... That is wild. Especially after what he has said about them. There's no, right-wing cult that he won't hook up with. So here we go, we got Loser Box.
So apparently Traveling Israel did a video about Hassan. I think Hassan spoke about Traveling Israel really, really early on in the conflict. He never made a video about him before. He actually did one on me before, Hassan. But I guess he's responded. Hassan, have you made a video about me? Free Palestine, no thanks.
Well, that already tells us quite a lot about who travelingisrael.com is. Oh wow, travelingisrael.com is a Holocaust is a Holocaust denier. It turns out. See, look at this bottom one, Hitler and the Mufti. See, there is this okay. One of the problems that Zionist apologetics has is that they rely so heavily on the Holocaust as sort of justifying whatever they're doing, but the trouble is that the Palestinians didn't do that shit. That was Germans, and they're cool with Germans, and Palestinians who didn't do any of that shit, they're murdering and torturing and dispossessing and everything. And so very relatively recently they came up with this claim that the Mufti of Jerusalem, who it's worth noting, Al-Husseini, the Mufti of Jerusalem, was imposed by the British. There was an election, the Palestinians elected somebody else, and the British didn't like that guy, so they put Al-Husseini in. Now, the thing to know about that particular lie is that Al-Husseini, that nobody believed it while he was alive. Like, he lived openly, completely, not hidden at all, in Lebanon for the rest of his life. Israel made no effort to do anything about him. This is around the same time as they were, went all the way halfway across the world to, grab Eichmann. Only after the Mufti died and it became politically convenient did they come up with this bullshit story. So that tells us a lot about Traveling Israel. He's a Holocaust denier. Neat!
Okay. Ooh. Okay. Let's go.
Because it is way too long.
Ha!
Hassan Abi made a video about it.
Hassan.
Oh no.
It is actually an almost 2-hour-long video that argues against me and the issues I explain in my video, Free Palestine, No Thanks.
Well, I don't think that Free Palestine was an offer being made to you in the first place. I don't think you get to decline it.
He is joined by a historian called Zachary Foster.
Yep.
The video was actually made a few months ago, and a large number of my followers have sent it to me. Anyway, the points he raised against me are still relevant today.
Okay.
I won't be showing it all because it is way too long, but I will share a link here below so you can watch the whole thing if you want to. I have no problem with people saying I'm wrong.
Yep.
However, I do have a problem with people calling me a racist and saying...
Oh, well, you clearly are a racist, though. Free Palestine, no thanks is a pretty racist thing to say. You're literally saying you don't think Palestinians should be allowed to have freedom.
That I have been dehumanizing other people.
So you have been.
I will start with that.
Doesn't this guy... Hang on. I feel like the problem is that there's not much delineation or any effort to delineate made. When he makes videos like this, hang on, where's the one where he says we should listen to Palestinians and it's actually bait for him just showing a bunch of clips of Hamas supporting terrorists saying crazy what's it, calling them the world's most privileged refugees, as if you think refugees in Lebanon are privileged. They
Oh yeah, this is, it's just all, why would, let's see, these titles. The Jews never stole any land, but the Arabs did. Palestinians, the world's most privileged refugees. Yeah, that's the people in Gaza. Yeah. So, why would anyone call this guy racist?
Live in slums. He does this video
There's a war going on. And one of the most challenging things we need to do is listen. Although it is hard, we must listen to the other side. In our case, we, the Israelis...
why are you speaking in English then, if you're saying Israelis must listen to the Palestinians? It almost sounds like the point of this video... it sounds like the point of this video is actually not directed at Israelis. It's directed at people in the U.S.
Must listen to the Palestinians. Let's start with the women. The female voice is not heard enough in the Middle East. What do Palestinian women have to say? What do Palestinian mothers have to say?
Like, it's such a funny...
Oh, wait, okay, I know this interview. It is from a documentary, like a biographical documentary of a Palestinian political prisoner, and this is his mother. And I mean, what he was actually abducted and put in the concentration camps for was fighting the Israeli army, very specifically, in Gaza. So, I mean, of course he leaves out this context. I mean, I forget the name of the documentary. It's an Al Jazeera documentary anyway.
A little thing like this, we don't listen to the troubles of the other side. We should actually listen to the suffering of the Palestinians and to understand maybe why they got into
this is a long interview with her. It's worth noting. He's picked like the conclusion where she is not like setting it up and explaining why she's saying this and what she means.
That they got into. No, let's just watch a fucking clip, probably from Memory TV, of some crazy like Hamas supporting woman talking about genocide.
No, she's just the mother of a political prisoner who was tortured for years and years and years for resisting the occupation. But of course, for Loserbox, that means she must be mentally ill. She probably is traumatized as fuck. Her son was tortured, and she's been living under occupation all her fucking life.
And murdering fucking Israeli civilians. Like, come on, dude.
Well, except no. I mean, the guy who is her son, who this documentary was about, was never even accused of doing anything to civilians. He was literally doing operations against the army.
Yeah, of course people are going to call you racist because you don't make it sound as if you've given any thought ever to acknowledge any like substantial Palestinian suffering that might have actually been caused by Israelis to some degree. Like, you didn't even humor the idea. This is just a memory compilation. Like, yeah, okay, some Palestinians like have a very pro-Hamas sympathies. Quite a lot of them do, actually.
Yeah, and one worthwhile question is why it is that they're so popular.
Some of them are very open about their acceptance of murdering Israeli civilians. Not all of them are, though. And Traveling Ezra doesn't seem to care about that. He doesn't seem to go.
Well, no, because he's a fucking propagandist. And what he's trying to do is, like, appeal to racists so they will bring tourist money to Israel.
Or even just understanding like how they got into that predicament and the role that and the sacrifices and the kind of like Palestinian suffering that almost had to happen for Israel to exist. Even if you go back to...
What do you mean almost had to happen? It did happen. It was literally, you can't have a colonial regime on Palestinian land with an artificial settler majority unless you kick out the people who lived there before.
The early evictions and the pre-Balfour Declaration. And that's just for a start. But he doesn't care about any of that. Like, it's all like, and everything bad that Israel ever did to Palestinians is always because Palestinians did something worse earlier. That's always what it's, that reflexive instinct to just never want to concede anything. Like, yeah, he's like an expert at doing that because he's a propagandist.
He's just painting a picture that dehumanizes Palestinians. This broader initiative among Zionists to dehumanize the Palestinian people. He's being incredibly bigoted towards Muslims. You know, I am deeply anti-Palestinian. I am super racist against Arabs and Muslims.
Don't call me names just because you can't prove me wrong.
I mean, it's trivial to prove you wrong, and it's not calling you. You know, he's racist. It isn't even subtle.
Because I won't comply with the rules of progressive political correctness. Do I make generalizations?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do I support genocide? Yes. Do I deny the Holocaust? Yes. Because do I do it specifically to justify genocide against Palestinians? Yes.
We all do, both when we say good things about any group and when we criticize it. If I say that men are more violent than women, does that mean that all men are violent? Does it mean that I...
Well, I mean, you're pretty violent.
...hate all men? Does it mean that there are no violent women? No, no, and no. But if 95% of men in jail all over the world are men, then you can say that men are more violent.
Except, I mean, that assumes that they're in jail for violent stuff, which... I mean, most people are not in jail for violent stuff.
95% of men in jail are men. Is that a... Is he saying something about trans people? I don't know. Misspeak, okay.
If I say that most Muslim countries are undemocratic,
or that
Yeah.
Muslim society is a very religious society and doesn't tolerate gay people. Am I wrong? Now, are all...
Yeah, well, it's a little bit rich to be saying that as a pro-Israel propagandist, though, because Israel's homophobic as shit. Israel is not, like, one of the ministers in the current government, proudly describes himself as a fascist homophobe. But I see it as time to wrap up. Thank you for everyone who tuned in. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I hope it was interesting. Mosquito bites. Oh, watch out for mosquitoes if you're on the eastern seaboard, because there are some actually rather dangerous mosquitoes, mostly in the northeast right now. But this would be a good time to stock up on repellent on the eastern seaboard, is my understanding. But, yes, I will be back on Friday at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and I hope to see you then. And hopefully by then I will also be allowed to post links on Facebook again, which I still am not able to do. I still have not been given an actual explanation for why I'm not able to do it. Just Facebook is fucking up as per usual. For anyone who isn't in the Discord, let me just drop that link here. And I will see you next week. Have a good rest of your weekend, or at least hopefully a better rest of your weekend. And Caleb Maupin can fuck off.